The $100 million of unappropriated education funds are still there. They haven't been vaporized, okay? It is a funding source for at least part of the hold harmless of education this year. The intent is to leave it unappropriated so that in the 2009 session, we have some place to work for public education, for growth in public education.
So that is not going to be used to make up the 82 million shortfall from last.
That's correct. And I wanted to get Senator Dimitrich have a chance to say something. I'm sorry, Mike. Did you want to say something real fast? I'm sorry.
They don't have a quorum of natural resources. That call was, and they're getting ready to vote. I just think the real problem that we're facing is not this year. It's going to be the January, February session, and thank God I'm not here. But I think it's going to be very trying at that time, and glad to hear the public kids held harmless for that time, but the real decision making and the real hurt in this budget process, I think, is going to be in 2009. Today, I think we have to be responsible and face the situation we have. The committees that I serve on, 2 committees, and the 4% really does hurt. That's where they get into the possibility of losing FTEs, but it hasn't been finalized yet. So I think the approach that the leadership has taken, I support. And I think that we're going to win this battle in the end. But thanks for your time.
Thanks, Senator.
Don't let Senator Dimitrich fool you. The ghost of Senator Dimitrich will haunt these halls for another 40 years.
Mike, would you tell him I'll be there in just a second?
Okay, Senator, can I ask you about the status of the bonding negotiations? My understanding was the Senate position is up to $65 million in bonding to free up cash. That's the governor's position as well, as I understand it, but the House is not.
Did we take that position?
Well, that's what's on the framework.
The framework says as needed.
Right. Well, that's why I said up to 65.
It's for cash flow needs, though, Bob. Okay. Let me explain what I'm talking about. When you take the cash away from the budget, you end up with less cash to spend for projects that you're already committed to do. You have already let the contracts. You may have actually already started moving bridges or whatever it may be, okay? Those projects you got to continue to pay for. But now we have less cash, not only current year, but for the future years. So what we've agreed to do is to bond for the cash needs of UDOT this year. We do not yet have a number. In fact, if you'll ask me that in a couple hours, I'm going to go to transportation next, and we're going to work on that number.
And with great fear and trepidation, I'll say this too. We don't know where it's all going to shake out. I was really pleased in public debt this morning. We were anticipating a $50 million non-lapsing balance, and they identified 60. So we found $10 million there that could come forward to help. So hopefully, rather than even bonding for these, if we can find one-time money to fill in lieu of bonding, that was what we like to do for the buildings at $30 million, and then the roads for $35 million we're talking about. So it's not done yet.
You covered this a little bit already, but if you were going to give an overview of the amount that you're relying on the agencies to make these decisions, and you look them over, give them some oversight and say, okay, and the amount to which you're looking line by line and saying, no, I think this ought to be cut.
My perspective would be we're probably 85% mutual agreements.
85% what?
Mutual agreements. So we're basically accepting what the agencies have recommended.
For the most part, the committee chairs told us in caucus this afternoon that the agency recommendations are what they're going to be relying on.
And I think the agencies have worked closely with our staff too, so it's been kind of a discussion coming up with these agreements.
Most of the cuts I've heard about so far are the 3% and 4% being made to the state agencies. When is the discussion going to occur where we're going to cut the one-time funding to make up that extra 1%? Is that something you guys are going to caucus, or am I just missing it in committee meetings?
My best guess is that we'll sit down as a leadership team with the House and start identifying those places that we think make the most sense, and go back with that to probably an executive appropriations meeting rather than trying to do that in each of the subcommittee meetings.
President, if I could make an observation here, through Senator Hilliard's leadership, the President, the Speaker, and the Governor. This is a little different budget negotiation than any of you have covered before, because you have the Governor, the agencies themselves, the committee chairs, executive appropriations, and leadership, bipartisan at least in the Senate. You heard from Senator Dimitrich. we're finding that we're working together to achieve a budget resolution rather than some of the animosity. And there's still going to be some engaging debates on, as we get down that 15% max that we haven't, you know, if we're 85% there, there's still some issues that we're going to have some robust discussions on. But this is different, the atmosphere is different than we've seen in the last 8 years dealing with the budget, because everyone on both sides of the aisle, and both the legislature and the governor, I look at Senator Jones working with us on education, and across the board it's different. And that's something that you guys haven't had an opportunity to cover, at least over the last 8 years, this approach to finding a budget adjustment, the scaling back, etc. So it's different.
It sounds like the real negotiations are going to be done in this leadership meeting later today, when you identify who gets their 1% back, when you identify where that money is going to come from one-time funding. Some agencies will leave their committee meeting today thinking we've got a 3% cut, possibly 4%, with some of it coming back. And we'll end up with a much larger cut because they'll lose a big chunk of one-time funds. We're not really going to know how this shakes out until that meeting.
What the problem is we've got a lot of pieces,
Yeah.
a lot of different places. And so by taking those pieces from all those different places, we're going to be having to pull them back together in one spot. That's why we want to get together tonight to have a proposal to take back tomorrow morning, saying, here's the proposal of taking all the pieces that have been developed all day today. That's why we're trying to do it that way.
Why not do that in an open meeting as executive appropriations instead of?
That's where it'll be done. Leadership will have to at least have a framework to pull together, and then it'll be in the executive appropriations meeting when those things are actually adopted.
So that's this evening, in executive
No,
appropriations?
the executive appropriation is scheduled sometime between 6 a.m. and 3 o'clock p.m. tomorrow.
And I just say, the reason we don't do it the other way is that we can only be in session 30 days. You know, if we had an open meeting and everybody on their own, and this is a very complicated thing kind of put together, and it's a series of compromises.
And we can't see those compromises.
Lisa,
You wouldn't want to.
there's another answer, or another response to that though. The 81 million in one-time money, the reduction, we've also got the non-lapsing funds, and so can you use non-lapsing funds to fulfill the commitment on those one-time expenditures, even though the one-time budget money is down? That's part of the pieces that we haven't put together yet. So you're saying that they'll have these substantial cuts. We may be able to use some of their non-lapsing money to fund those one-time appropriations, because the one-time budget money is not there, but they do have the non-lapsing balances. So that's all. There's a lot of moving parts.
Well, sure, but you're doing 3% cuts in a vacuum because we don't know where the one-time money's coming from. So if an agency has a big chunk of that one-time money, their cuts could be more than 3%.
There are a lot of moving parts right now.
You're correct, but to be able to get it done within any kind of reasonable time frame, we've got to make a proposal, and then that proposal goes to a public meeting such as executive appropriations where it's hashed out some more.
There's another player called the governor. So when we get through our negotiations where we are, it's obvious we're going to sit down and run past the governor, because hate to have something vetoed.
Exactly.
Will that be tonight?
Hopefully. Senator Davis.
This is a, really a difficult situation for him. To balance the budget is probably the #1 issue that's before us. And I mean, as legislators, that's our constitutional responsibility, is to balance the budget. We have to do that. And it's how do we get there? And I guess, to use that old axiom, whose ox gets scored is really the tough thing that we have to look at. Thank heavens we're looking at the fact that we can backfill education, take care of the public education. There are other areas that raise great concern for the minority side of this. And that's the fact that we're not going to have the amount of money that we needed in Medicaid. A very painful way to look at that. I mean, you're balancing it on back and forth.